The head of NATO says the alliance's troops will stay in Iraq for the long haul, so long as that's okay with the Iraqi government.
NATO will only be in Iraq if we are invited by the government of Iraq. And the reason why we now are planning for scaling up our training activities is the request from the Iraqi government. Second, we have no intentions to stay here longer than necessary.
Well, it seems NATO's apparently got a written invitation from the Iraqi Prime Minister for troops to stay in the country to keep ISIL at bay, even though the Premier is under pressure from Parliament to push for a timed withdrawal in the near future. Someone very much with his ear to the ground on this one. Let's get the thoughts of veteran American politician and former Congressman Ron Paul. Ron, lovely to see you tonight. Thanks for your time. This is going to be bad news for you to hear, isn't it? Jens Stoltenberg insists NATO will not stay longer than necessary, he says. Are we to believe that 15 years in?
Hardly. And their definition of necessary is a lot different than a lot of other people's. You know, the people of Iraq have spoken. Their legislative body voted and said that we ought to leave. And I think that's a grand idea. The president speaks for our government as well, because they're in collusion and they depend on each other. So, yes, I think they're going to stay. I wish that the American people would wake up and say enough is enough. 15 years. We've been longer than that in Afghanistan, and it certainly challenges the position of many of us in the States that said that we shouldn't have gone there in the first place. And even our president was very adamant about, you know, when he thought he was off camera, when he was at a private meeting, but somebody recorded him, he says it's the dumbest thing we've ever done. And I wished he would apply that same logic to what we're doing in Syria and every place else, because there's a large group of us in this country seen as libertarians and conservatives and constitutionalists that believe that we shouldn't be doing this, and that we certainly should have permission from the people through the Congress. But no, we get involved in this without declarations of war. It's been endless. So I guess we're going to continue to do this until we go bankrupt, and then we'll have to leave.
But the worry is, back on a practical note, back there in Iraq, that ISIL will regroup. That's the excuse that's being used here. Is it a danger that it will regroup, and that, therefore that's why NATO's continued presence is needed?
Yeah, well, that's just a lot of baloney, because it wasn't there when we went in. We used it as an excuse. We said Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11, and we had to go in and get al-Qaeda. He didn't have it. It was all based on lies. Because of the disruption and the chaos in Iraq, al-Qaeda has moved in. So they weren't a problem, and Saddam Hussein was not friendly with al-Qaeda. But now maybe there are some. But it's a reaction to our policies. Our policies stir up these hatreds in the organizations of the radicals, and there's a growing number of people who recognize this. Unfortunately, our governments, whether they're of the Democrat Party or Republican Party, they're generally endorse this idea that we have this moral obligation to straighten everything out, and they use it as an excuse because we have to spread American exceptionalism and, you know, bring peace to the world. But there's always other reasons for doing this, and usually not too many of the American people understand that there's a group of people who see some secondary gain, and there's a lot of profits being made, and oils and port and all these things. I just hope they just keep their minds open to this position that we hold. It's just time to come home. Yeah. We ought to mind our own business, and we ought to save the money, and we would be as strong as ever, if not a lot stronger, with our independence.
But it's never a perfect world, is it? Where's Donald Trump going to stand on this, do you think? This news that NATO's going to be sticking around in Iraq? Behind the scenes, what's the feeling, do you think?
I think he'll go along with it, even though I think personally he was probably speaking more from his heart, you know, when he mentioned that the other night at the fundraisers, that it was a stupid thing to be in. But somebody's going to come up with a scheme that said, you know, if you leave, this is what's going to happen, and the pressure groups will come in. And that group that we call the secret government, the deep state, and the special interests, they're going to come in and they're going to badger him, and he probably will go along. I hope I'm absolutely wrong on that, and there's always a chance that would happen because I think that's where his instincts are, but I do think that he has caved in. He has too many neoconservatives in his administration to think that they will not have a hearing, and too much of the media here in this country is controlled, you know, by the neoconservatives who are always aggravating for our presence around the world, and that's why at the present I'm rather pessimistic.
Following on for your train of thought there, OK, bring the boys home, etc., but for whatever reason, if you've gone in and make a mess, aren't you duty bound to kind of clear it up again? Is that where the money should be spent, trying to get Iraq back on track?
Some people argue that, and then they justify, well, we blew up the country, we have to go rebuild it. I don't think so, but why punish more people? There's a lot of Americans, the service people, the people who have come home and suffered, and all the people who paid the taxes. So you go to the next generation and say, well, we want to tax you more, we have to send our troops over there to rebuild the country. No, enough is enough. Interference is wrong. It's a real tragedy, and I think the country that we have been involved in, Iraq, would do a lot better if we're not there interfering. And I don't think it's morally right to extend it and punish the next generation for trying to rebuild the country.
Let's broaden it out a bit while you're on the line. Well, we've got you for a minute or two more. On a separate note, Russia and China are being listed as the main threats to the USA, while North Korea is getting a lot of heat still from Washington, despite these U-turn moves over the last couple of days, saying, well, they want to talk. It's not gone down that well, according to President Trump. What's really bothering America's leaders right now, geopolitically? What's the bigger danger? North Korea, China, Russia, what?
Well, it depends on what day of the week it is. You know, it sounds like on some days that it sounds like North Korea is the biggest threat. But I don't think they're going to attack America. In matter of fact, I think if we'd leave them alone, the North and the South would get along together. I thought the Olympic breakthrough was great. I think the delegation going to the North was great. And it even softened the stand of the president in North Korea, as well as our president softened his stand too. And I hope that continues. I don't see anybody as a threat. I think our policies are our biggest threat. Why do we want to have a trade war? And why do we want to stir up problems with China? And why should we stir up problems with Russia? So I think our policies are the things that bother me the most, that we're way too much involved.
This trade war.
And that, to me, is a threat. Because
this trade war thing is big news right now. Where's it going to end, do you think?
It's going to be horrible. Well, unfortunately, I'm hoping still that there will be a dissent against this, you know, with the various congressmen. But, you know, there's too many in the administration that Trump has handpicked, and they really believe in trade wars and tariffs and these sorts of things. But I think it's going to end badly. I think our stock market is starting to reflect that condition that this could go down. But we were due for a big correction anyway in our economy, because we've been living on borrowed time and borrowed money, and all the QEs that we pumped out there and interest rates that have been zero for so long, we've been living with that. So it was due to have a bust, and so they need an excuse for our stock markets and bond markets to go down. I think once they have these.
I want to go back to the Koreas just to say again. Well, we're going to milk this a bit more. We're going to get a bit of extra time. What's going to happen there? Why is Donald Trump so sceptical about North Korea's intentions here? Yes, we've seen the backwards and forwards over the decades, but why is he so sceptical? And indeed, where's this come from? Do you think there's been diplomacy behind the scenes as well that we haven't been party to get it to where it is now?
Well, I think the people who stir up these troubles, and we always have to have an enemy that's about to attack us, whether it was Saddam Hussein or whether it's in North Korea, it's part of the reason that part of the problem there is they use that to justify the continuation of the military-industrial complex. We have to build more weapons. We have to rebuild our nuclear system, and it goes on. And there's a lot of I think there's war profits that drive a lot of this. It certainly isn't national security. They say it's for for national security. And some of our neocons are saying, you know, that this is necessary for national security and stability, and the cost will be worth it. Nonsense. It's costing too much and it's not worth it. What would be beneficial to us is that we had a completely different foreign policy designed to have peace and trade with people and to talk with people when we have our disagreements. That is what I think is necessary, and hopefully someday we'll move in that direction.
Former US Congressman, live from the States tonight. Ron Paul, thanks for being live on RT International. It was nice to see you.